M-A-L, Washington, D.C. Welcome to the Savage Nation. Go ahead, please.
Line 6?
Yeah, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
I'd just like to point out that the United States does not have an official language, so for you to say that anyone who comes to this country needs to learn English is completely uninformed and actually...
That's right, millennial. You facile millennial. The United States has no official language. Is that true?
It's true. The United States does not have...
It is true, Mr. Millennial. That's why I say we need an official language called English, where ballots will only be in the English language, Mr. Millennial.
Ridiculous.
Oh, so you like a Tower of Babel? Do you know any other nation on earth that prints ballots in every other language but its own?
No, I'm not saying every other language, but languages that are popularly spoken in the...
Oh, yeah, popular languages. You would make one up. The language du jour. Arabic, Spanish, Tagalog, Korean, Chinese, you name it.
Yeah, I live in New York City, and it's one of the most diverse cities in the entire...
Isn't that wonderful? Do you feel proud that you live in such a diverse city? Does it give you a sense of civic pride, your diversity?
I think that celebrating culture...
Is it this diversity that built America? Is that what you're talking about? This great diversity that you're trumpeting, is that what built America? Illegal aliens pouring out of every corner of America, that's what built the country?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean, What do you give me, The illegal immigration only started under Bill Clinton. What do you mean, Do you know anything about history? There used to be an orderly immigration policy in the country. And although America welcomed immigrants, it was a melting pot, not a chamber pot. Do you know the difference between a melting pot and a chamber pot?
Of course I know the difference.
All right, take a walk, millennial. Go have a frappuccino on me. I'll be right back. What is a millennial? What exactly is a millennial, and why do I have a problem with millennials? Well, a person reaching young adulthood around the year 2000. What does that mean? Millennial generation, or Generation Y. A demographic that is so coveted by the media. No precise dates on them, but birth years ranging from the early 1980s to the early 2000s. And we know that they're basically a soulless generation of mindless robots who don't seem to be involved at all with politics. They've been brainwashed since childhood by the school system, the government schools, to think that there are only two problems on earth: gay marriage and global warming. They have no evidence for global warming, nor is there any evidence that by agreeing to gay marriage it will make society better. And yet these brainwashed children think that both are true. If you confront them with the facts about global warming being fraudulent in the minds of many respected scientists, they would look at you the way the Red Brigades would look at people in, let us say, China at the time of the Red Brigades. They would blink at you as though you are the fool. Nor would they listen to your evidence, because their minds, whatever's left of them, is made up. Now, how did they get this way is the issue. And what are we in for if these millennials, so-called, eventually take over this country, which they will do? I can tell you exactly what's waiting for you. So let's start with you seniors who are looking forward to a nice retirement and Obamacare to take care of your every need so you can go on a cruise and play golf. They'll pull the cord on you faster than you could say Barry Obama. They'll be the ones to say, who cares about those old fools sitting on those incubators? Get rid of them all. We don't need them. That's what they'll say. Welcome to the new young Germans, a new generation of young Germans called millennials.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
A march of the millennials, so-called. I know it's a facile phrase of young people. And advertisers are obsessed with this demographic, thinking that they determine everything. But there are things that we have to talk about here. Because if you're going to focus on the me generation, you'd be focusing on two generations before them. No, we have to focus on what's called the me, I generation. The generation of soulless zombies. Oh, they buy things. Oh, yes, they do. And that's very important to marketers. And it's an important demographic, no doubt. But what is this demographic? What do they think? What's on their mind? Do they actually know what's going on in the world around them? Do they care? Or do they care only about their own pleasure? What restaurant they're going to eat in, what shoe they're going to buy, what vacation they're going to go on, what device they're going to be using. And what's going on with the millennials is a very important story, because they are going to craft the future of this nation. It's not going to be the 60-plus audience that's going to craft the future of America. And it also explains how ISIS can rampage through the Middle East, raping, murdering, enslaving, without a peep out of the millennial generation. The only people complaining about it are me, people of my generation. The only people noting that Obama is behind ISIS is my generation. The only people agonizing over it are my generation. The so-called sensitive millennial generation is concerned with very, very few issues that have been beaten into their brains in the government schools, by the media, and, of course, at home. Those issues are predominantly the fake issue of global warming. No matter what evidence you present them, their minds are made up. They're like zombies. They're like the youth in other countries that worshipped a dictator. In this case, they worshipped the dictatorship of no thinking, the dictatorship of believing, not thinking. So the issues to them are what? What are their issues? Well, global warming. They want to save the planet. Who doesn't? And let's see, gay marriage, of course. If all gays were allowed to marriage, why the world would be a perfect place. So they say nothing when gays are thrown off the roofs in Iraq. They don't even know what's going on. They don't talk about it. They say nothing when young girls are raped by ISIS. But if anyone says anything about it, they say you're anti-Muslim or you're Islamophobic, because that's how these mindless children have been raised. And so what's going to come next? You tell me what's going to become next is the issue. KWQW. Ron, welcome to the Savage Nation. Go ahead, please.
Yes, sir, Dr. Savage. I think it's the hippie generation, which you have mentioned before, which is the cause for the millennial generation, because they are looking for excuses for themselves for being failures. And their failures have to be subsidized by the kids who are brought up by them. So therefore, they don't really want to admit failure because of their kids being failures, because it makes them look failures.
Have you ever seen the mobs in the streets of Ferguson or Baltimore, in addition to the black thugs? Did you see who was marching and pushing behind them? It was the millennials. Now, the same millennials who are now deriding themselves, deriding the fact that there are no longer police to protect them, they're the ones who drove the police out of these cities. Do they have any idea that there are consequences to their behavior? No, because there's never been a consequence to any of their behavior. They were indulged by their hippie parents.
Yes, sir, that's exactly right, and it's because of the way they were brought up. And if they don't have to respond or have excuses or prove themselves to their parents, how are they going to do it in public to police forces or the public in general? It's impossible.
So they've been raised by the ACLU, by the radical left, to hate police, to love immigrants, to hate Christians, to despise religion, to assume that anyone who's religious is a bigot. Is that not the mentality of the millennial?
That's exactly right. And I, as much as I don't want to defend them, they were kind of indoctrinated because of yes, they have been indoctrinated. They are the Khmer Rouge of our time. They are the soulless monsters who are definitely not on the side of the good guys. They're on no side whatsoever. They don't know what to think. Correct, sir, and they won't know what to think in the future either, as long as they're being, pretty much facilitated by the liberal media, which endorses and indoctrinates them even further. Any channel,
right? As long as they have sunglasses and a yoga mat, they think the world is a perfect place.
Exactly right, among other things, which includes drugs and homosexuality behavior, such as this Jenner character, and everything that's supposed to be acceptable and appreciated and approved, when it's really not. But the liberal media imposes that it should. Therefore, we all have to accept it because they have the majority of the listeners, if you will.
Well, that's how a man like Obama gets away with lying, because if you say anything about his lies, they call you a racist. They have been indoctrinated to believe that anyone who criticizes a person of color is by definition a bigot. Even if you're right, you're wrong. This is the problem we're having right now. I think that I have focused on this for one reason, is that one of the reasons we're having so much trouble in America is because we have an entire generation of mindless, soulless robots who have no idea about the bigger world. It's only the yoga mat. It's only what they're putting in their mouth and their yoga mat that matters. Thank you for the call, but hold it. Let me send you a gift called Countdown to Mecca, a book that no millennial would ever be seen with. They're bullies everywhere, on the low level, on the high level. We're living in a new age. Yesterday I talked about the millennials. Boy, did I get heat for that one. They said, you can't say all millennials are bad. I said, I'm talking as a social commentator. And I still allege that the millennials will turn out to be the worst generation in American history. The beatniks gave birth to the hippies. The hippies gave birth to the yuppies. The yuppies gave birth to the millennials. They're the end line of the beatnik. And the millennials are without conscience. They're like the Khmer Rouge of China, or of, more specifically, like Cambodia. I don't mean they're actually going to throw you into a grave. I don't mean they're going to kill you. But they're like the Khmer Rouge. They seem to have no conscience. They seem to be zombie-like. No care, no feelings. They have no emotions. They seem to have no emotions other than getting what they want. From the me generation to the I generation. Seems that the I generation, the iPhone, came along about the same time. So I'm not very optimistic that this generation is going to save the country, incidentally, going back to that question. I think they'd roll over to anyone who raises their voice to them. They've been raised by bullies in the schools. They're intimidated by everybody and everything. And they have no feelings whatsoever for senior citizens in particular. So if you think that Obamacare is going to come along and save you, and the millennial has a choice between pulling your plug or keeping you alive, get back to me on that one. Susan, WJR, welcome. You're one of the few women who listen to the show. Of the millions of listeners I have 24 Savagettes, and you're one of them. Thanks for calling.
I would like to respond to your comment on the idiot millennials, as you like to refer to them, and I want to be measured in my response. But these kids were not raised in a vacuum. They were raised by the end tail of the baby boomers and some of the Generation X. So if you're going to have a messed up, as you have called them, the messed up idiots, they have some idiot parents that are also raising them, because kids are not raised in a vacuum. They get their morals, their character from their parents. And furthermore, the millennials are not old enough to have voted for all of the crap that we have going on in our country right now. It was the baby boomers and the Generation Xers and even the older baby boomers that have voted for all of this stuff. And the millennials are going to have to be the ones that have to pay for it. I take such... this word is such a stupid word, but umbrage about what you said. I have two millennials, one who just graduated from Hillsdale College. I have done my darndest to raise productive human beings, and from my perspective, it is the parents' fault, not the millennials, because they're taking their cue from their parents.
How would you define, what's a millennial in age? What's the age bracket for a millennial?
The millennials are about 31 down to about 17, in that range. I mean... All
right, so let's turn the clock back 15 years when they were babies, some of them, when I was talking on the radio about their so-called mothers in coffee houses, feeding them a piece of cake and a coffee or a chocolate in the morning, after all the hard work that I did and millions and others did in nutrition, to teach about the dangers of sugar and caffeine to a child in particular, to see these mothers doing this to them simply, they were too lazy to make them a breakfast. They figured just stuff them with something and a Ritalin pill and send them off to school. Don't you think that has something to do with their mindlessness?
No, I don't think that has, because we're talking about two different things. You're talking about nutrition, and what I'm talking about right now is the potential destruction of this country. And if we do make it, sugar and caffeine will be the last thing on their mind.
No, I don't think you understand what I'm saying to you. The reason the millennials are vacuous in general and have almost no conscience, no social conscience, they agree with anything that is thrown in their direction because they were raised as little liberal robots. One of the reasons for that is that they were drugged since they're children, many of them. In one way or another, they were raised on medication. Don't you understand that?
No, they have not been. I don't know where you're...
Well, you mean your children haven't been. But I am not talking about your children. You're making it overly personal. I am talking about the larger population of millennials.
Millennials have not raised millennials. It was a different generation that were raising the millennials.
No, but was saying the same thing, and that other generation were lazy, and they would just as soon drug the child as raise the child. And then the child grew up on medication which destroyed their conscience in many cases. That is my point.
Generation before them. This is a generational problem.
Well, we're saying the same thing, and you're going over and over about the same because it's not you or your children. You're telling the entire audience that you did it differently. I'm agreeing with you, but I'm saying in general, the millennials are a vacuous generation of mindless children.
What I am trying to tell you...
And now you'll go back again and say it's their mother's fault, right?
No, I don't think it's the mother's fault. I think it's a generational problem that has been handed down. Government has become...
Well, let's stop blaming the government. When you have a child that was raised holding a device in his hand, or her hand, a robot walking down the street would have more brains than a child does with an iPhone in their hand who steps out in front of a car and expects the car to stop for them.
Did you look at the parents that are going right next to the child? They're also on their devices.
That's what I just said. So we're agreeing. We're not disagreeing.
You're missing my point. I don't care.
Well, what is I don't know what your point is. You're going in circles.
No, I'm not going in circles. You have consistently spoken about the millennials as being a worthless generation, and you are wrong. The generation prior to them is...
Well, let's stop with who caused this. You're not telling me that this millennial generation has a morality to them, are you?
But the morality came from the generation before them.
Well, it doesn't matter who did it. I'm telling you that I see them as a very dangerous generation of soulless individuals who are permitting the country to melt down. All you're saying is that their parents are responsible.
Can I say one thing? They did not vote for what we have right now. The lion's share of what is going on went on long before these...
When have you last seen a millennial in a high school march against the rape and slaughter of women and children by ISIS? Tell me when. All you see them marching for is global warming and gay marriage. That's all that's on their mind. They're brainwashed robots.
When is the last time you've seen any adult that would be in the category of the age of their later 40s, early 50s? What I'm trying to tell you is
but two wrongs don't make a right. So you're telling me there's two generations in a row that are soulless and mindless. Is that what you're saying?
What I am trying to tell you is to put all the blame on one generation when there is another generation.
It doesn't matter it doesn't matter where the blame falls. I made a generic statement that the millennials, and I'm sick and tired of hearing the word, and I'm sick and tired of catering to them, and I'm sick and tired of hearing what they think, because they don't think. All they do is spew the data that they get off an iPhone or what's been put into their silly little heads in the public schools.
I am trying to get you to think of some...
All right, here we go. It's enough already. This woman is like a robot herself. I think she's exactly the problem we were talking about. No matter what you say to her, again, like a broken record, like a needle stuck in a vinyl record. I'll be right back. One thing I am really expert at is reading the tea leaves. I have the greatest stethoscope in social science. And I am telling you that these millennials, this millennial generation is so dangerous people cannot even understand what's coming at them. They have no idea what's coming at them. I do. I've seen it before. I've read history. Only this generation is even worse. Because if you take a soulless, mindless generation and you add to it drugs and iPhones, no knowledge, just facts. No knowledge, just information. No wisdom, only facts. That's not a generation that I have much faith in.